I stand in my empty office building this Monday morning after Thanksgiving, staring at 17 resignation emails that arrived overnight. My phone buzzes with another missed call from my sister Brenna. 3 days ago, she humiliated me in front of our entire extended family, calling me an incompetent fraud who only succeeded through luck. 2 hours later, I quietly removed her from the company payroll. Now my entire management team has quit in solidarity with her. My biggest client is threatening to leave, and I realize my moment of revenge might have destroyed everything I built over the past 8 years. As she posted the video to her social media accounts, adding a caption that I couldn't quite read from across the table, but that made her smile with genuine cruelty. In the span of 20 minutes, my sister had systematically destroyed my reputation in front of our entire family, and then shared my humiliation with her hundreds of social media followers. And as I looked around the table at faces that had seemed so loving just hours earlier, I realized that this had never been a spontaneous confrontation. This had been a coordinated attack planned and executed by people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The golden warmth of Thanksgiving evening had transformed into the coldest night of my life. I excused myself from the table with what dignity I had left, walking calmly to the downstairs bathroom while my entire world collapsed around me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the door handle, and when I finally locked myself inside that small space, the face staring back at me from the mirror looked like a stranger. This was what defeat looked like. This was what it felt like to have everything you believed about yourself and your relationships stripped away in the span of a single evening. The successful businessman, the family protector, the reliable older brother, all of it revealed as elaborate fiction in the minds of the people who mattered most. But as I stood there in that bathroom, something unexpected began happening in my mind. The devastation and humiliation were being slowly replaced by a crystalline clarity I hadn't felt in years. I thought about my employees, 23 people who depended on me for their livelihoods, their health insurance, their career development. I thought about Jessica, who had started as an intern and grown into one of the most talented creative directors I had ever worked with. I thought about David, who had been unemployed for 8 months before I hired him and who now owned his first house. I thought about Maria, who had been able to send her daughter to private school because of the salary and benefits I provided. These weren't people I was manipulating for ego gratification. These were human beings whose lives had genuinely improved because I had created something valuable and sustainable. The fact that my own family couldn't see that value didn't diminish its reality. I pulled out my phone and opened the company management app that allowed me to handle administrative tasks remotely. My fingers moved with steady purpose as I navigated to the employee directory and found Brenna's profile. For just a moment, I hesitated. This was my sister. Despite everything that had just happened, she was still family. Removing her from the company payroll would be a point of no return, an action that couldn't be undone or explained away as temporary anger. But then I remembered the USB drive Tyler had mentioned, the client files she had stolen and shared with Marcus. I remembered her recording my humiliation to post on social media. I remembered the months of planning that had led to this orchestrated attack on my character and reputation. This wasn't a sister having a bad day or struggling with jealousy. This was a business partner actively working to destroy the company that employed 24 people, including herself. I clicked on Brenna's employee profile and began the termination process. First, I removed her access to all company systems, email client databases, financial records, building security codes. Then I canceled her company credit card and health insurance enrollment. Finally, I updated the payroll system to reflect her immediate termination, effective as of 5 p.m. today. Each click felt like surgery performed without anesthesia necessary, but excruciating. But with every system access I revoked, I felt a strange sense of calm returning. For the first time in months, I was taking decisive action to protect something I had built instead of just reacting to other people's attacks on it. My phone buzzed with a text message from Sandra Chen, the CEO of our largest client. The timestamp showed she had sent it just minutes ago. Preston, I hope you're having a good Thanksgiving. I saw some concerning posts on social media from someone claiming to work at your company. Can we schedule a call tomorrow to discuss? I'm sure it's nothing but our board is asking questions. My stomach dropped. Sandra's company represented almost 30% of our annual revenue. If they decided to end our relationship because of whatever Brenna had posted, it could cripple my business and put my employees' jobs at risk. I opened social media and searched for Brenna's recent posts. What I found was worse than I had imagined. She had posted the video of my humiliated reaction at dinner, but she had also written a detailed caption claiming to be a whistleblower, exposing unethical business practices at my company. According to her post, I regularly overcharged clients, took credit for employees' work, and created a hostile work environment through intimidation and micromanagement. She claimed that multiple employees were afraid to speak up about my behavior because they feared retaliation. The post had already been shared dozens of times and was generating comments from people I didn't recognize, expressing outrage about my alleged conduct and demanding that clients reconsider their relationships with my company. I screenshot everything before Brenna could delete it, creating documentation of her defamatory statements. Then I composed a calm, professional response message to Sandra. Hi, Sandra. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving as well. I'm aware of the social media posts you're referring to. The individual making those claims is a recently terminated employee who was let go for violations of confidentiality and theft of proprietary information. I have documentation of these violations and would be happy to discuss the situation with you and your board. I understand your concern and appreciate your professionalism in reaching out directly rather than making assumptions based on social media rumors. I sent the message and then spent several minutes composing a group text to my management team, informing them of Brenna's immediate termination and asking them to review their teams for any signs of information security breaches. The responses came back quickly. Jessica, thank God. I've been waiting for someone to address Brenna's behavior for months. David, I know this must be difficult since to the wind, but somehow we had held together and even grown stronger. Dinner's ready, Aunt Patricia announced, and we all gathered around the extended table that barely fit in the dining room. Uncle Robert said grace thanking God for family health and the blessing of being together. As we began passing dishes and filling our plates, conversation flowed naturally between funny stories, gentle teasing, and updates on everyone's lives. I felt genuinely, deeply happy. The kind of happiness that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong, surrounded by people who love you and whom you love in return. Preston, Aunt Patricia said as we started on dessert. Robert was just telling me how you've managed to keep this family together after everything you've been through. Your parents would be so incredibly proud of the man you've become. The warmth in her voice, the approving nods from around the table, the way Tyler beamed at me like I was his personal hero, it all felt perfect, sacred even. But as I basked in that golden moment of family love and acceptance, Uncle Robert casually mentioned something that would shatter my peaceful world completely. Speaking of business, Preston, I ran into Bill Morrison at the hardware store yesterday. He mentioned hearing some concerns about your company from the Better Business Bureau. Something about questionable practices, I told him, that couldn't be right but thought you should know there might be rumors floating around. The bite of pumpkin pie turned to dust in my mouth. Bill Morrison was a local business owner who had never liked me, but the Better Business Bureau claim was completely fabricated. We had never been investigated, never had complaints filed, never had any contact with them whatsoever. But someone had started this rumor, someone who knew enough about my business to make it sound credible. And as I looked around the table at my beloved family, I couldn't shake the growing suspicion that the source of this lie might be sitting right here among us. The dessert that had tasted like heaven just moments before now felt like sawdust in my throat. I set down my fork carefully, trying to process what Uncle Robert had just said while maintaining my composure in front of the family. Uncle Robert, I can guarantee that's completely false, I said, keeping my voice steady. We've never had any contact with the Better Business Bureau, positive or negative. Someone must have our company confused with another business. But even as I spoke the words, my mind was racing. Bill Morrison hadn't just made this up out of thin air. Someone had fed him specific information about my company, detailed enough to sound credible. Someone with insider knowledge. Well, you know how rumors spread, Aunt Patricia said diplomatically. People love to gossip, especially about successful businesses. I noticed Brenna shift uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding my gaze. When I looked directly at her, she was suddenly very interested in rearranging the remaining cranberry sauce on her plate. What exactly did Bill say? I asked Uncle Robert, though part of me didn't want to hear the answer. Nothing too specific. Just mentioned hearing from someone that your company had some complaints about overcharging clients and taking credit for work that employees actually did. I told him that sounded like jealous nonsense, but he seemed pretty convinced. The room fell silent except for the gentle clinking of silverware against plates. I felt heat rising in my face, not from embarrassment, but from a growing anger that someone was deliberately spreading lies about the business I had built through 8 years of blood, sweat, and sacrifice. That's absolutely ridiculous, I said, perhaps more forcefully than I intended. Every client relationship I have is built on transparency and mutual respect, and I would never take credit for my employees' work. The whole reason I started this company was to create an environment where talented people could thrive and be recognized for their contributions. Of course, sweetheart, Aunt Patricia said soothingly. We all know what kind of man you are. But Tyler was looking between Brenna and me, with a worried expression that suggested he knew something I didn't. When our eyes met, he quickly looked away and excused himself to use the bathroom. Brenna finally spoke up, her voice carrying an edge I hadn't heard before. Well, Preston, you have to admit that some of your business practices might seem questionable to people who don't understand the industry. What do you mean by that? I asked, genuinely confused. I mean charging clients $50,000 for marketing campaigns that cost maybe $10,000 to execute, or restructuring deals so that you get most of the credit when clients see results. Some people might call that manipulation. The accusation hit me like a physical blow, not just because it was completely wrong, but because it was coming from Brenna, who knew better than anyone how hard I worked to maintain ethical business practices. Brenna, that's not how our pricing works at all. Our fees reflect strategy development, creative work, market research, campaign management, and ongoing optimization. Clients know exactly what they're paying for and what they're getting. And I have never, not once, taken credit for work that my team produced. If you say so, she replied with a shrug that felt dismissive and cold. Uncle Robert cleared his throat uncomfortably. Well, I'm sure it's all just misunderstanding. People don't always understand how modern businesses operate. But the damage was done. The warm, loving atmosphere that had defined our gathering just minutes earlier had evaporated, replaced by tension and suspicion. I found myself looking around the table and wondering who else might be harboring doubts about my character or my business. Jake was studying his phone with unusual intensity, as if avoiding the conversation entirely. Sarah kept glancing at her husband Mark with an expression I couldn't quite read. Even Aunt Patricia seemed less comfortable busying herself with clearing plates that weren't ready to be cleared. You know what? I said, standing up from the table. I think I need some fresh air. All this food is making me sleepy. I stepped out onto the back porch, pulling the cold November air deep into my lungs. The familiar backyard of my childhood looked exactly the same as it had when Mom used to chase Tyler and me around with a garden hose during summer afternoons. But everything else felt different now, poisoned by doubts and accusations I couldn't understand. My phone buzzed with a text message. When I pulled it out, I saw it was from Jessica, one of my most trusted employees and our director of creative services. Hey Preston, hope you're having a great Thanksgiving. Quick question about the Henderson account. Brenna mentioned you wanted to change our approach completely, but that doesn't sound like you. Can you confirm when you get a chance? I stared at the message in confusion. I had never said anything about changing our approach to the Henderson account. In fact, our current strategy was performing exceptionally well, generating results that exceeded all projections. Why would Brenna tell Jessica I wanted to make changes? A cold realization began forming in the pit of my stomach. I scrolled through my recent text messages and found the thread with Brenna from earlier this week. Our conversation had been completely normal. Discussions about client schedules, holiday plans, and her excitement about Tyler's grades. But now I remembered something that hadn't seemed important at the time. 3 days ago, Brenna had asked me detailed questions about our most profitable clients, claiming she needed the information for a presentation to potential new hires. I had shared client revenue figures, contract details, and strategic information that could be incredibly damaging in the wrong hands. The sliding door opened behind me, and Tyler stepped onto the porch. Preston, we need to talk, he said quietly. What's going on, Tyler? And please tell me the truth. My youngest brother looked miserable, shifting his weight from foot to foot like he used to do when he was 7 years old, and had broken something valuable. Brenna made me promise not to tell you, but I can't keep this secret anymore. She's been meeting with Marcus. Marcus. Brenna's ex-husband, the man who had cheated on her, repeatedly lied about their finances and left her emotionally devastated. The man she claimed to hate more than anyone on earth. What do you mean meeting with him? Coffee dates, lunch meetings, long phone conversations. She says they're just talking, trying to be mature about their divorce. But Preston, the way she talks about you after these meetings? Tyler trailed off, looking genuinely pained. How does she talk about me? Like you're holding her back. Like she's too good to be working for her younger brother. Like you don't appreciate her talents or give her enough credit. She keeps saying Marcus understands her potential in ways you never will. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore. Marcus had always resented my success, especially after Brenna started working for me and found stability again. He had probably spent months planting seeds of doubt in her mind, exploiting her insecurities, and turning her against me. Tyler has, she said anything specific about my business, about wanting to leave or start her own company? Tyler nodded reluctantly. Marcus told her she could make twice as much money running her own consulting firm. He said he'd help her get started, maybe even invest in the business, but she'd need to bring client contacts and industry knowledge with her. Client contacts and industry knowledge. Exactly the kind of information I had foolishly shared with her just 3 days ago. There's something else, Tyler continued. Last month, when I visited your office, Brenna asked me to copy some files from your computer. She said it was just client contact information for a project she was working on. I felt weird about it, so I copied the files but then deleted them from the USB drive before giving it to her. But Preston, I think she might have already looked at whatever was on there. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Marcus had ever done to our family. Brenna wasn't just planning to leave my company. She was systematically gathering information to compete against me using knowledge she had gained through my trust and the access I had given her as family. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Because she's our sister, because she made me promise, because I hoped maybe I was wrong about what she was planning. I put my hand on Tyler's shoulder, feeling older than my 32 years. You're not wrong, and you did the right thing by telling me now. This isn't your fault. But as we stood there in the cold, looking back through the sliding glass door at our family gathered around the dinner table, I realized the worst was yet to come. Brenna wasn't just planning to betray me professionally. Based on the rumors already circulating and the way she had spoken to me tonight, she was building a narrative that would justify her actions by destroying my reputation first. And judging by the uncomfortable silence that had fallen over dinner, her campaign was already working. I stood on that porch with Tyler for several more minutes, letting the cold air clear my head while I processed the magnitude of what I had just learned. When we finally went back inside, the conversation around the dinner table had shifted to safer topics, like Tyler's college classes and Sarah's upcoming school play. But underneath the surface politeness, I could feel the tension crackling, like electricity before a thunderstorm. Brenna was animatedly discussing her plans for Black Friday shopping with Aunt Patricia, but I noticed she kept glancing at me with something that looked almost like guilt. Or maybe it was anticipation, like she was waiting for something to happen. I excused myself to use the bathroom upstairs, needing a few minutes alone to think through my next move. The hallway was lined with family photos spanning decades. Mom and Dad's wedding birthday parties, Christmas mornings, Tyler's high school graduation. All of it felt precious and fragile now, like I was looking at artifacts from a lost civilization. As I passed by the guest bedroom where people had been leaving their coats and purses, I noticed Brenna's phone sitting on the nightstand screen glowing with notifications. She must have forgotten it when she went downstairs after dinner. I knew I shouldn't look. Respecting privacy was a fundamental principle I had always maintained. But Tyler's revelations had shaken me so deeply that I felt like I was drowning in doubt about everything I thought I knew about my own family. The phone wasn't locked, and her text messages were visible on the screen. The most recent conversation was with someone named M. Obviously Marcus. Family dinner going exactly as planned. Preston totally bought the BBB rumor setup. Uncle Robert delivered it perfectly. My hands started shaking as I read the message chain. Marcus, how's our boy handling the pressure? Brenna, he's getting defensive just like you predicted. The family is starting to see his true colors. Marcus, perfect. Keep pushing tonight. By the time we're done, they'll be begging you to leave his company. Brenna, I still feel bad about this. Marcus, baby, he's been holding you back for 2 years. Tonight we set you free. I scrolled up to see more of their conversation from earlier this week. Marcus, did you get those client files Tyler copied? Brenna, yeah, before he deleted them. Henderson Industries, Morrison Tech, Garrett Holdings. Their contract details, pricing structures, everything we need. Marcus, beautiful. My investor friends are very interested. You'll be running your own firm by Valentine's Day. Brenna, what about Preston? This is going to destroy him. Marcus, Preston will be fine. Rich kids always land on their feet. Besides, he'll thank you eventually for teaching him some humility. The phone slipped from my hands and clattered onto the nightstand. I felt physically sick, not just from the betrayal, but from the calculated cruelty of it all. This wasn't some spontaneous decision made in anger. Marcus and Brenna had been planning this for months, systematically undermining me, while I trusted her with my business and my family. But the worst part was realizing that other family members were involved. Uncle Robert had delivered the BBB rumor perfectly, which meant he knew it was false and was deliberately helping to damage my reputation. Footsteps in the hallway made me freeze. Brenna appeared in the doorway and her eyes went immediately to her phone. Looking for something? She asked, and her voice was completely different now. The warmth and affection I had heard all day were gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. Tyler told me about your meetings with Marcus. She stepped into the room and closed the door behind her, transforming the space from neutral territory into a private battlefield. So now you're having family members spy on me. That's rich, coming from the guy who's been treating me like a charity case for 2 years. Charity case, Brenna. I hired you because you're talented and because I wanted to help you rebuild after your divorce. Everything I've done has been about supporting you and Tyler. Supporting us. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean controlling us? making us dependent on you so you can feel like the big shot who saved the family. The accusation hit me like a slap across the face. That's not true, and you know it. Don't I, Preston, you make every major decision for this family without consulting anyone? You paid for Tyler's college without asking if he wanted to be indebted to you for the rest of his life. You hired me at your company so you could keep an eye on me and make sure I stayed grateful. I hired you because you needed a job and because you're good at client relations. And I paid for Tyler's education because Mom and Dad would have wanted him to go to college. Mom and Dad are dead, Preston. You're not their replacement no matter how much you want to be. The words were like a knife twisting in my chest. For 4 years, I had carried the weight of trying to hold our family together, making sacrifices that my siblings didn't even know about. And now Brenna was treating those sacrifices like evidence of some psychological flaw. Why are you doing this? What did Marcus tell you to make you hate me so much? Marcus didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. He just helped me see what everyone else can see, that you're not the selfless hero you think you are. You're a control freak who uses money and guilt to manipulate people. I stared at her, trying to find some trace of the sister who had hugged me in the driveway just hours earlier, but this person in front of me felt like a stranger wearing Brenna's face. What about the client files Tyler said you asked him to steal information from my computer? I asked him to copy some contact information that I helped generate through my own work. You act like you built that company single-handedly, but half of those client relationships exist because of my efforts. Of course your work contributed to our success. I've never claimed otherwise. But that doesn't give you the right to steal proprietary information and share it with Marcus. I didn't steal anything. I just documented my own contributions so I could leverage them when I start my own business. You mean when Marcus starts a competing business using my clients and my strategies? She shrugged with a casualness that was more infuriating than any shouting match could have been. Competition is healthy, Preston. Maybe it'll force you to actually innovate instead of coasting on the reputation you accidentally stumbled into. There it was again. The narrative that my success was just luck, that I didn't deserve what I had built. I was starting to understand that this wasn't really about business or career opportunities. This was about something deeper, something that had been festering in my family for years. Brenna, I've never once claimed that my success was inevitable, or that I'm smarter than anyone else. I worked my tail off for 8 years because I wanted to create security for our family. Everything I've done has been motivated by love. Love. She practically spat the word. Preston, you took over this family the day Mom and Dad died. You made unilateral decisions about their funeral, about this house, about Tyler's future. You never once asked what the rest of us wanted. You were both falling apart. Someone had to make decisions. And you loved every minute of it, didn't you? Finally getting to be the responsible one. The successful one. The one everyone looked up to. Her words hit uncomfortably close to something I had never wanted to examine too closely. Had I enjoyed being needed? Had some part of me found satisfaction in being the family hero? Maybe you're right, I admitted quietly. Maybe I did make decisions I shouldn't have made alone. But that doesn't justify what you're doing now. If you wanted to leave the company, if you wanted independence, you could have talked to me. We could have figured out a transition plan that worked for everyone. And what stay trapped under your shadow for the rest of my life. Always being known as Preston's sister, never as Brenna who accomplished something on her own. Building something on your own doesn't require destroying what we've built together. Maybe not, but it sure makes it easier. The door opened, and Tyler appeared looking back and forth between us with obvious distress. Everyone's wondering where you guys went, he said quietly. Brenna pushed past both of us without another word, leaving me alone with Tyler in the guest room. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, feeling like I had aged 10 years in the span of one conversation. Preston, there's something else you need to know, Tyler said reluctantly. This morning before you arrived, I heard Brenna on the phone with Aunt Patricia. They were talking about how to handle the conversation about your business. Aunt Patricia said Uncle Robert would bring up the BBB thing casually, and then Brenna could build on it from there. So it wasn't just Marcus and Brenna. My own extended family had been recruited into this conspiracy turned against me by whatever story Brenna had been telling them about my character. How long has this been going on? I don't know for sure. But Preston, some of the things they were saying, Tyler trailed off, looking miserable. Tell me. They said you've gotten too big for your britches. That success has gone to your head and made you arrogant. Aunt Patricia thinks you need to be humbled before you hurt someone important. I closed my eyes and tried to process the fact that people I loved and trusted had been planning to humiliate me during what was supposed to be a family celebration. Tyler, I need you to listen to me carefully. Whatever happens tonight, whatever gets said, I want you to know that everything I've done has been because I love this family, even if I made mistakes along the way. He sat down beside me on the bed. I know that, Preston. And for what it's worth, I think they're wrong about you. You saved us after Mom and Dad died. I don't know where Brenna and I would be right now if you hadn't stepped up. His loyalty meant more to me than he could possibly know. But I had a sinking feeling that the worst of this confrontation was still ahead of us. When we returned to the dining room, I could feel the shift in energy immediately. The casual conversation had stopped, and everyone was looking at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed hostility. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. Preston, while you were upstairs, we got to talking about your business situation. Brenna filled us in on some of the challenges you've been facing. I looked at Brenna, who was watching me with the satisfied expression of someone who had just laid a perfect trap. And I realized that everything that had happened so far tonight was just the warm-up act. The real show was about to begin. The silence in the dining room felt heavy as a thundercloud ready to burst. Everyone was looking at me expectantly as if waiting for a performance I hadn't been told I was supposed to give. Brenna sat back in her chair, with her arms crossed, wearing an expression I had never seen on her face before, cold satisfaction mixed with something that looked almost like hunger. What kind of challenges? I asked, though part of me already knew I didn't want to hear the answer. Uncle Robert shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Well, according to Brenna, there have been some issues with employee morale, complaints about your management style, questions about whether you're really qualified to run such a large operation. I felt like I was being ambushed by people speaking a foreign language. Employee morale at our company was excellent. We had virtually no turnover, competitive salaries, and comprehensive benefits. Last month, we had been featured in a local business magazine as one of the best places to work in the Denver metro area. I'm not sure what you've heard, but our employee satisfaction ratings are consistently high. We conduct quarterly surveys, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. Jake, who had been quiet most of the evening, suddenly spoke up. Come on, Preston, you don't have to put on an act here. We're family. Act? What are you talking about? Sarah's husband, Mark, leaned forward with the earnest expression of someone about to deliver hard truths. Look, man, we've all been talking, and we think it's time someone was honest with you. This whole successful business owner thing has gone to your head. I stared at him in disbelief. Mark was a nice enough guy, but he worked in insurance sales and had never shown any previous interest in my career or business practices. Now he was talking like he had insider knowledge about my company and my character. Mark, what exactly do you think has gone to my head? The way you talk about your employees like they're lucky to work for you. The way you throw money around to solve every family problem. The way you act like you're some kind of business genius, when really, you just got lucky with timing. There it was again, the lucky narrative. But hearing it from Mark, who barely knew me, made it clear that this wasn't a spontaneous observation. Someone had been carefully crafting this story and sharing it with my extended family. Aunt Patricia, who had been washing dishes in the kitchen, returned to the dining room with a dish rag in her hands and an expression of maternal concern. "Sweetheart, we're only saying this because we love you. But success can change people, and sometimes they can't see it themselves. How exactly has success changed me? Well, for starters, you've become quite controlling, making decisions for Tyler without asking him what he wants, hiring Brenna but then micromanaging every aspect of her work, taking credit for achievements that were really team efforts. The accusations were so far from reality that I struggled to formulate a response. I had specifically structured my company to give employees autonomy and recognition. My management philosophy was built around delegation and empowerment. But apparently, my own family had been convinced of exactly the opposite. Aunt Patricia, I've never taken credit for my employees' work. In fact, I go out of my way to highlight their contributions in client presentations and company communications. If you say so, dear. The dismissive tone was like a slap in the face. This woman who had helped raise me, who claimed to be proud of my accomplishments, was now treating me like a delusional child who couldn't see his own flaws. Cousin Jake was nodding along with everything being said occasionally, throwing in comments about how I had always been a little too intense and obsessed with being important. Even his wife was giving me pitying looks, as if I were some tragic figure who couldn't recognize my own descent into arrogance. But the cruelest part was watching Tyler struggle with the situation. I could see him looking back and forth between family members, clearly torn between loyalty to me and pressure to go along with the group consensus. "You know what?" Brenna said, suddenly standing up from the table with the fluid motion of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "I think it's time we stopped dancing around this and had an honest conversation." She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone, holding it like a weapon. The movement made my stomach clench with dread, though I couldn't have explained why. "Preston, for months now, I've been listening to you talk about your business like you're some kind of entrepreneurial genius. But the truth is, you only have money because you got lucky. You're actually an idiot who stumbled into success." The words hit me like a physical blow, not just because of their cruelty, but because of the theatrical way she delivered them. This wasn't an emotional outburst born from family frustration. This was a calculated performance, designed for maximum impact. Everything you think you've accomplished, you accomplished by accident. You dropped out of college because you were failing, not because you had some brilliant business vision. You started your company because you couldn't get hired anywhere else. And the only reason it succeeded is because you got lucky with timing and market conditions. The room was completely silent now except for the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I looked around the table and saw family members nodding in agreement, as if Brenna was finally speaking truths they had all been thinking for years. "You want to know what your employees really say about you?" She continued, building momentum like a prosecuting attorney delivering a closing argument. "They think you're insecure and desperate for approval. They laugh about how you name-drop clients and exaggerate your role in their success stories." None of this was true. I knew it wasn't true because I maintained close relationships with my team and regularly solicited honest feedback about company culture. But in this room, surrounded by family members who were hanging on Brenna's every word, objective reality felt less important than the narrative she was weaving. "And your clients, the ones you're so proud of, half of them, are staying with the company despite you, not because of you. I'm the one who manages those relationships. I'm the one who smooths over your mistakes and makes excuses for your inexperience." She was gaining confidence now, feeding off the rapt attention of our audience. I could see Uncle Robert and Aunt Patricia exchanging glances that seemed to say they had suspected this all along. "Preston, you're 28 years old and you act like you're some kind of business veteran." "I'm 32. I corrected automatically, then immediately felt foolish for focusing on such a trivial detail when everything else she was saying was so much more devastating. 3228? What's the difference? You're still just a kid playing dress up in a grown-up world. The only reason anyone takes you seriously is because you inherited mom and dad's house and used it as collateral to fund your little hobby business. The mention of our parents and the house felt like she had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart with her bare hands. Yes, I had used the house as collateral, but only because I believed so completely in my vision that I was willing to risk everything. It had been the most terrifying and courageous decision of my life, not some casual gamble made with inherited wealth. "Brenna, that's enough," Tyler said quietly, but his voice was shaking and he wasn't looking at me. "No, Tyler, it's not enough. For 4 years, we've all been walking on eggshells around Preston because we were grateful for his help, but gratitude doesn't mean we have to pretend he's something he's not." She turned back to me, and the expression on her face was pure malice. "You know what your biggest problem is, Preston? You actually believe your own success story. You've convinced yourself that you're this brilliant entrepreneur who saved his family through hard work and determination. But the truth is, you're just a college dropout who got lucky once and has been riding that luck ever since." I tried to laugh along with the family members who were chuckling at her observations, hoping to diffuse the situation with good humor. But my laughter sounded hollow and forced, and I could feel my face burning with humiliation. And the funniest part, Brenna continued, clearly enjoying herself now. "Preston thinks he's helping people by giving them jobs and opportunities. But really, he's just feeding his own ego. Every employee, every client relationship, every family decision. It's all about making Preston feel important." Cousin Jake was nodding enthusiastically. "I always wondered about that. Like, who just decides to start a company right out of college unless they have serious control issues?" "Exactly," Brenna said. "Normal people get jobs, gain experience, learn from mentors. But Preston was so arrogant that he thought he could skip all that and go straight to being the boss." The worst part was that some of what she was saying contained tiny grains of truth. I had been young and inexperienced when I started my company. I had made mistakes that a more seasoned entrepreneur might have avoided. But she was twisting those facts into a narrative that made my entire journey seem like the product of delusion and ego, rather than determination and growth. "You want to know what really happened?" Brenna said, raising her phone and pointing it at me. "Preston got one lucky break with his first client, and instead of being humble about it, he decided he was destined for greatness. Every success since then has been about proving to himself that he deserves to be taken seriously." I realized with horror that she was recording me. My humiliation wasn't just for the family gathered around this table. She was documenting it to share with the wider world. "Brenna, please turn off the phone. Why afraid people might see how you really react when someone challenges your carefully constructed image?" My hands were trembling now, not with anger, but with a deep, visceral shame that I couldn't control. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my relationships, about my own identity was crumbling around me. These people who claimed to love me were taking pleasure in systematically destroying my confidence and self-worth. And the most crushing realization was that Tyler, the brother I had sacrificed so much to support and protect, was sitting in silence while it happened. Brenna lowered her phone with a satisfied smile. "Don't worry, Preston. Maybe getting knocked down a few pegs will help you develop some actual character." Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She looked down at her phone screen and started typing, her thumbs moving quickly across the keyboard. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Just sharing a little reality check with the world. People should know what you're really like when you think no one important is watching." I watched in horrified fascination as she posted the video to her social media accounts, adding a caption that I couldn't quite read from across the table, but that made her smile with genuine cruelty. In the span of 20 minutes, my sister had systematically destroyed my reputation in front of our entire family, and then shared my humiliation with her hundreds of social media followers. And as I looked around the table at faces that had seemed so loving just hours earlier, I realized that this had never been a spontaneous confrontation. This had been a coordinated attack planned and executed by people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. The golden warmth of Thanksgiving evening had transformed into the coldest night of my life. I excused myself from the table with what dignity I had left, walking calmly to the downstairs bathroom while my entire world collapsed around me. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn the door handle, and when I finally locked myself inside that small space, the face staring back at me from the mirror looked like a stranger. This was what defeat looked like. This was what it felt like to have everything you believed about yourself and your relationships stripped away in the span of a single evening. The successful businessman, the family protector, the reliable older brother, all of it revealed as elaborate fiction in the minds of the people who mattered most. But as I stood there in that bathroom, something unexpected began happening in my mind. The devastation and humiliation were being slowly replaced by a crystalline clarity I hadn't felt in years. I thought about my employees. 23 people who depended on me for their livelihoods, their health insurance, their career development. I thought about Jessica, who had started as an intern and grown into one of the most talented creative directors I had ever worked with. I thought about David, who had been unemployed for 8 months before I hired him and who now owned his first house. I thought about Maria, who had been able to send her daughter to private school because of the salary and benefits I provided. These weren't people I was manipulating for ego gratification. These were human beings whose lives had genuinely improved because I had created something valuable and sustainable. The fact that my own family couldn't see that value didn't diminish its reality. I pulled out my phone and opened the company management app that allowed me to handle administrative tasks remotely. My fingers moved with steady purpose as I navigated to the employee directory and found Brenna's profile. For just a moment I hesitated. This was my sister. Despite everything that had just happened, she was still family. Removing her from the company payroll would be a point of no return, an action that couldn't be undone or explained away as temporary anger. But then I remembered the USB drive Tyler had mentioned, the client files she had stolen and shared with Marcus. I remembered her recording my humiliation to post on social media. I remembered the months of planning that had led to this orchestrated attack on my character and reputation. This wasn't a sister having a bad day or struggling with jealousy. This was a business partner actively working to destroy the company that employed 24 people, including herself. I clicked on Brenna's employee profile and began the termination process. First, I removed her access to all company systems, email client databases, financial records, building security codes. Then I canceled her company credit card and health insurance enrollment. Finally, I updated the payroll system to reflect her immediate termination, effective as of 5 p.m. today. Each click felt like surgery performed without anesthesia necessary, but excruciating. But with every system access I revoked, I felt a strange sense of calm returning. For the first time in months, I was taking decisive action to protect something I had built, instead of just reacting to other people's attacks on it. My phone buzzed with a text message from Sandra Chen, the CEO of our largest client. The timestamp showed she had sent it just minutes ago. Preston, I hope you're having a good Thanksgiving. I saw some concerning posts on social media from someone claiming to work at your company. Can we schedule a call tomorrow to discuss? I'm sure it's nothing but our board is asking questions. My stomach dropped. Sandra's company represented almost 30% of our annual revenue. If they decided to end our relationship because of whatever Brenna had posted, it could cripple my business and put my employees' jobs at risk. I opened social media and searched for Brenna's recent posts. What I found was worse than I had imagined. She had posted the video of my humiliated reaction at dinner, but she had also written a detailed caption claiming to be a whistleblower, exposing unethical business practices at my company. According to her post, I regularly overcharged clients, took credit for employees' work, and created a hostile work environment through intimidation and micromanagement. She claimed that multiple employees were afraid to speak up about my behavior because they feared retaliation. The post had already been shared dozens of times and was generating comments from people I didn't recognize, expressing outrage about my alleged conduct and demanding that clients reconsider their relationships with my company. I screenshot everything before Brenna could delete it, creating documentation of her defamatory statements. Then I composed a calm, professional response message to Sandra. Hi, Sandra. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving as well. I'm aware of the social media posts you're referring to. The individual making those claims is a recently terminated employee who was let go for violations of confidentiality and theft of proprietary information. I have documentation of these violations and would be happy to discuss the situation with you and your board. I understand your concern and appreciate your professionalism in reaching out directly rather than making assumptions based on social media rumors. I sent the message and then spent several minutes composing a group text to my management team, informing them of Brenna's immediate termination and asking them to review their teams for any signs of information security breaches. The responses came back quickly. Jessica, thank God. I've been waiting for someone to address Brenna's behavior for months. David, I know this must be difficult since she's family, but this is the right call for the company. Maria, do you need us to change any passwords or security protocols? Their support meant more to me than they could possibly know. These people who worked with me every day, who saw my actual management style and business practices, weren't surprised by Brenna's termination. If anything, they seemed relieved. I realized I had been so focused on maintaining family harmony that I had ignored warning signs about Brenna's impact on company culture. Her toxicity hadn't just been directed at me, it had been affecting my entire team. A knock on the bathroom door interrupted my thoughts. Preston. It was Tyler's voice, soft and uncertain. Can I talk to you? I opened the door to find my youngest brother standing in the hallway looking more mature than I had ever seen him. The boyish enthusiasm that usually defined his expression had been replaced by something sadder, but wiser. Tyler, I need you to know that everything I did for this family, I did out of love. If that love somehow got twisted into something controlling or manipulative, I'm sorry. That was never my intention. Preston, stop. He looked me directly in the eyes with an intensity that reminded me of our father. You don't need to apologize to me. You saved my life after Mom and Dad died. You kept me in school, gave me stability, helped me become the person I am today. What happened in there tonight was wrong, and I should have stood up for you. You were in an impossible situation. No, I wasn't. I was in a situation where I had to choose between doing the right thing and taking the easy path. I chose wrong, and I'm sorry. He paused and seemed to gather his courage before continuing. Preston, there's something else you need to know. Brenna asked me to lie to you about something. She wanted me to tell you that Marcus was just offering emotional support about the divorce. But the truth is, he's been promising to fund her competing business if she can steal enough clients from your company. How do you know that? Because I heard them talking about it last week when Brenna thought I was upstairs studying. Marcus has investors lined up, but they want proof that Brenna can deliver high-value clients before they commit funding. The plan was to humiliate you tonight, make you look unstable, then position Brenna as the more reliable option for your current clients. The calculated nature of the attack was breathtaking. This wasn't just about sibling rivalry or career ambition. This was corporate espionage disguised as family drama. Tyler, I want you to understand that what I did tonight, removing Brenna from the company, wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting the jobs and livelihoods of 22 other people who depend on our business being stable and successful. I understand, and I think you did the right thing. My phone buzzed with another text message, this one from an unknown number. Preston, this is Marcus. We need to talk. What you did tonight was a mistake that's going to cost you everything. Call me. I showed the message to Tyler, who read it and shook his head in disgust. He thinks he's won, Tyler said. He thinks destroying you publicly gives him leverage to steal your business. Maybe he's right. Maybe I've made everything worse by fighting back. Preston, do you remember what Dad used to say about bullies? I smiled, despite everything remembering our father's favorite piece of advice. That they only have power if you give it to them. Exactly. Marcus and Brenna are bullies who've been counting on you being too decent to fight back. But decency doesn't mean letting people destroy what you've built. As I stood in that hallway with Tyler, I felt something shifting inside me. The hurt and humiliation were still there, but they were being joined by something I hadn't felt in years. Righteous anger. Not the petty anger of wounded pride, but the deep, purposeful anger that comes from seeing injustice and refusing to accept it. My phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Sandra Chen. I should take this, I told Tyler. Do you want me to stay? Yes, actually. I think it's time you learned how to handle a crisis. I answered the call, putting it on speaker so Tyler could hear. Hi, Sandra. Thank you for calling. Preston, I'll be direct. I've spent the last hour looking into these social media posts and I'm concerned. Not because I believe the accusations, but because this kind of public drama can impact our business relationship. I understand completely. Let me give you the facts. And for the next 10 minutes, I explained exactly what had happened. I shared documentation of Brenna's confidentiality violations, the evidence of her planning to steal clients, and the coordinated nature of tonight's attack. I was calm, professional, and completely honest about both the situation and my response to it. When I finished, Sandra was quiet for a moment. Preston, in 12 years of business relationships, I've never seen someone handle a crisis with such transparency and professionalism. The fact that you terminated your own sister to protect your company's integrity tells me everything I need to know about your character. Relief flooded through me like a physical sensation. Actually, Sandra continued, this situation has given me confidence that we chose the right partner. Would you be available next week to discuss expanding our contract for the next fiscal year? After I hung up the phone, Tyler was staring at me with something like awe. How did you do that? Do it. Turn the worst night of your life into a business opportunity. I thought about his question for a moment. I think I just remembered who I really am underneath all the doubt and guilt they've been piling on me for months. We could hear the family gathering breaking up in the dining room, car doors slamming, goodbyes being called normal Thanksgiving evening sounds that felt surreal given everything that had happened. But for the first time since arriving at this house 12 hours earlier, I felt like myself again. Not the successful entrepreneur or the family savior or any other role I had been trying to play. Just Preston, a man who had built something valuable and was willing to fight to protect it. The real consequences of tonight's decisions were yet to unfold. But standing there with Tyler's respect and Sandra's confidence, I knew I had made the right choice. Sometimes protecting what you love means being willing to lose people who don't actually love you back. Black Friday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood, as I sat in my home office reviewing the fallout from Thanksgiving night. I had barely slept, not because of guilt about my decisions, but because my mind was racing with contingency plans and damage control strategies. My phone had been buzzing constantly since 6 a.m. with calls from Brenna, but I let each one go to voicemail. I wasn't ready to engage with her directly until I had a clear picture of what she and Marcus were planning next. Around 8 a.m., Jessica called with an update that made my coffee taste like victory. Preston, I've been monitoring social media and industry forums since last night. Brenna's post is getting attention, but not the kind she was hoping for. Several people in our professional network are calling out her behavior as unethical and unprofessional. What do you mean? Well, Alex Morrison from Morrison Tech shared her post with a comment saying that anyone willing to publicly attack their own family member's business is exactly the kind of person you don't want to work with. And Sarah Kim from the Marketing Professionals Association pointed out that terminating an employee for confidentiality violations isn't vindictive, it's responsible management. I felt a surge of gratitude for colleagues who understood business ethics even when my own family apparently didn't. There's more, Jessica continued. I got a call this morning from 3 different companies asking if we're hiring. Apparently, word is spreading that we have high standards and strong leadership. One of them specifically mentioned being impressed by how you handled a difficult personnel situation. Any word from current clients? All positive so far. Henderson Industries called to confirm our Monday meeting, and the Garrett Holdings team sent an email saying they're excited about Q4 planning. I think Sandra Chen's response last night was typical. Professional people recognize professional behavior. By 10 a.m., I felt confident enough to venture out for a coffee run and some thinking time. As I walked through downtown Denver's business district, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Preston, this is Bill Morrison, the hardware store owner who had apparently been spreading BBB rumors about my company. I owe you an apology. Mr. Morrison, what can I do for you? Son, I saw some things on social media last night that made me realize I was fed some bad information about your business. Someone told me your company was under investigation, but when I called the BBB directly this morning to confirm, they said they've never had any contact with you whatsoever. That's correct, sir? Well, I feel like a fool for repeating rumors without checking facts. And I wanted you to know that whoever gave me that false information is not someone I'll be trusting again. The apology meant more than he probably realized. Bill Morrison was well connected in Denver's small business community, and having his respect restored could matter significantly for my company's reputation. Around noon, I was back home reviewing quarterly reports when Tyler showed up at my apartment without calling first. Well, Preston, we have a problem, he said as soon as I opened the door. Brenna's having some kind of breakdown. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept any better than I had. What do you mean, breakdown? She's been calling me every hour since midnight, crying and screaming about how you've destroyed her life. She drove to your office building this morning and tried to get inside, but obviously her access card doesn't work anymore. Then she went to Uncle Robert's house and demanded that he loan her money for rent. Did he give her money? That's the thing. No, he didn't. And Aunt Patricia basically told her she made her bed, and now she has to lie in it. I think last night was supposed to be the beginning of everyone rallying around Brenna and pressuring you to rehire her. But it's not working out that way. Tyler sat down heavily on my couch, running his hands through his hair in a gesture that reminded me painfully of our father. Preston, I need to tell you something else. Brenna showed me the text messages between her and Marcus this morning. He's completely ghosted her. Won't return her calls, won't answer texts, nothing. Apparently, his investor friends aren't interested in funding a competing business now that she's been publicly terminated for misconduct. The information didn't surprise me, but it did make me feel a complicated mix of vindication and sadness. Marcus had used Brenna's insecurities and resentments to manipulate her into destroying her own life. And now that she was no longer useful to him, he had disappeared. Tyler, I know this is hard because she's our sister, but Brenna's situation right now is the natural consequence of choices she made over several months. I didn't create this problem. I just stopped enabling it. I know. And honestly, seeing her behavior over the last 24 hours has been eye-opening. She keeps talking about how unfair everything is, but she never once mentions feeling bad about what she did to you. My phone rang, and I saw it was Aunt Patricia calling. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but Tyler encouraged me to answer. Preston, honey, we need to talk. Her voice sounded strained and tired. Good afternoon, Aunt Patricia. I owe you an enormous apology for last night. I don't know what got into me going along with that horrible attack on your character. I've been thinking about it all night, and I'm ashamed of myself. I appreciate that, Aunt Patricia. The truth is, I think some of us were jealous of your success and let that cloud our judgment. Brenna spent months telling us stories about how difficult you were to work with, and we wanted to believe them because it made us feel better about our own lives. Her honesty was painful but necessary. What kinds of stories? She said you belittled employees in meetings, that you took credit for work other people did, that you were obsessed with appearing successful even when the business was struggling. Looking back, I realized she never offered any specific examples or evidence. She just kept repeating these general accusations until they started to feel true. It was a textbook manipulation strategy. Repeat false claims often enough until they become accepted wisdom. Brenna had spent months poisoning family relationships by systematically undermining my reputation through unverifiable accusations. Aunt Patricia, I need you to understand something. I didn't terminate Brenna because of what she said last night. I terminated her because she stole client information and was planning to use it to compete against the company. Oh, honey, I had no idea. She recorded my reaction to her attack and posted it on social media to damage my business reputation. She violated confidentiality agreements and betrayed the trust I placed in her as both an employee and a family member. There was a long pause before Aunt Patricia spoke again, her voice heavy with regret. Preston, your uncle and I want to make this right somehow. We participated in something that was fundamentally wrong, and we need to take responsibility for that. The best thing you can do is have honest conversations with other family members about what really happened. Help them understand that this wasn't about family dynamics or personality conflicts. This was about protecting a business that employs 22 people. After I hung up, Tyler was looking at me with something like respect. You're not going to hold grudges against them, are you? Tyler, holding grudges is a luxury I can't afford right now. I have a business to run and employees depending on me. But I am going to be much more careful about who I trust with sensitive information. Around 3 p.m., my doorbell rang unexpectedly. When I looked through the peephole, I saw Brenna standing on my front steps, still wearing the same clothes from Thanksgiving dinner. She looked disheveled and desperate, in a way that made my chest tight with conflicted emotions. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. Preston, please, I need to talk to you. She looked like she had been crying for hours, her makeup smeared, and her hair unwashed. The confident, malicious person from last night had been replaced by someone who looked genuinely broken. Brenna, I don't think we have anything to discuss right now. Please, just 5 minutes. I know I messed up, but firing me is going to destroy my life. I can't afford rent without that job. I'll lose my apartment, my car, everything. You should have thought about those consequences before you decided to steal client information and plan a competing business. I wasn't really going to do it. Marcus was just talking, making plans that probably never would have happened anyway. Brenna, I have documentation of your meetings with him, your theft of company files, and your social media posts attacking the business. This wasn't just talk. She slumped against the doorframe, looking defeated in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of the broken person I had tried to help 2 years ago, after her divorce. Preston, Marcus told me you were holding me back, that I deserved better than working for my little brother. He made it sound like you hired me out of pity instead of recognizing my talents. And you believed him instead of trusting the person who actually gave you a job when no one else would. I know, I was stupid and jealous and angry about things that probably weren't even real. But please don't let my mistakes ruin my entire life. Looking at her standing there broken and desperate, I felt the familiar urge to fix things, to make everything okay for my family, regardless of the cost to myself. It was the same impulse that had driven me to sacrifice my own needs for 4 years after our parents died. But Tyler's presence behind me was a reminder that enabling destructive behavior doesn't actually help anyone. Brenna, I'll help you find another job. I'll even provide references that focus on your legitimate skills and accomplishments. But you can never work for my company again, and you need to publicly retract the false statements you made about our business practices. What if I can't find anything that pays as well? Why? Then you'll learn to live on less money like most people do. Financial consequences are how we learn that choices matter. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her cycling through anger, self-pity, and something that might have been the beginning of actual accountability. Preston, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am genuinely sorry for what I did to you and your business. It was the first real apology I had heard from her, free of excuses and qualifications. It didn't erase the damage she had caused, but it felt like a first step toward something better. Brenna, I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean pretending that what happened didn't matter. You broke trust in ways that affect more people than just me. After she left, Tyler and I sat in my living room talking about family loyalty and the difference between love and enabling. For the first time since our parents died, I felt like Tyler and I were relating to each other as equals rather than as guardian and dependent. Preston, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you think Mom and Dad would be proud of how you handled this situation? I thought about his question carefully. Our parents had valued integrity, hard work, and treating people fairly. They had also believed in accountability and natural consequences for poor choices. I think they would be proud that I protected something I built honestly, and that I didn't let family loyalty become an excuse for compromising my principles. I think so too. That evening, as I reviewed the day's developments and planned for the upcoming week, I realized something had fundamentally shifted in my understanding of myself and my relationships. For 4 years, I had defined my worth through my ability to hold our family together and solve everyone's problems. But true leadership sometimes means being willing to let people face the consequences of their own choices, even when you love them enough to want to protect them from those consequences. Especially when protecting them would mean betraying the trust of everyone else who depends on you. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp December air that makes everything feel possible. I drove to my office with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months, ready to begin the week with a team that no longer included toxic influences or hidden agendas. The first thing I noticed when I walked into the building was the energy in our workspace. Conversations were more relaxed, laughter came easier, and there was a general sense of relief that everyone could feel, but no one wanted to explicitly acknowledge. Jessica met me at the elevator with a coffee and an expression of barely contained excitement. Preston, you need to see something. She led me to the conference room where our entire management team had gathered for what was supposed to be a routine Monday morning meeting. But as I walked in, they all started clapping. What's this about? David, our longest tenured employee, stood up with a grin. Preston, we wanted you to know that what you did Friday night took courage. Terminating a family member to protect company integrity couldn't have been easy, but it was absolutely the right call. Maria nodded enthusiastically. We've all been walking on eggshells around Brenna for months, afraid to report her behavior because she was your sister. She was creating a hostile work environment, undermining team morale, and making people afraid to share ideas. What do you mean? She would shut down suggestions in client meetings by saying things like, Preston would never approve that, or that's not how we do things here, Jessica explained. But when we asked you about company policies, your answers were completely different from what she was telling us. Alex, one of our junior designers, spoke up hesitantly. Mr. Preston, Brenna told me last month that you said my work wasn't good enough for important clients, but then you personally complimented that same project in the team meeting. I felt a surge of anger at learning how extensively Brenna had been manipulating my team's perceptions and undermining their confidence. For the record, your work is excellent, Alex. And I want everyone to know that if anyone ever claims to be speaking for me about company policies or personnel decisions, please come directly to me for confirmation. The relief on their faces was unmistakable. I realized that Brenna's toxicity had been affecting far more than I had understood, and removing her was already improving our workplace culture dramatically. There's something else, Jessica said. Sandra Chen's company called this morning. They want to expand our contract and specifically requested that you personally manage their account. Apparently, how you handled the crisis situation impressed them enough that they're recommending us to 3 other companies in their network. What should have been the worst weekend of my professional life was somehow turning into one of the most positive developments our company had ever experienced. By standing up for our values and refusing to tolerate unethical behavior, we had actually strengthened our reputation in the business community. Around 10 a.m., Tyler arrived at the office carrying coffee and wearing a nervous expression. "Preston, I need to talk to you about something important." We went into my private office, and he sat down across from my desk with the serious demeanor he had developed over the past few days. "I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I realize I owe you more than just an apology. I owe you honesty about some things I should have told you months ago." "Tyler, you don't need to—" "Yes, I do. Preston, last month when you were in meetings all day, Brenna asked me to look through your computer files. She said she needed client contact information for a project, but she specifically wanted me to copy financial records and contract details." "Did you copy them?" "I started to because she made it sound like you had asked her to get that information. But something felt wrong about the whole situation, so I only copied the files to a USB drive and then immediately deleted them. I never gave her the USB drive, and I reformatted it to make sure nothing was recoverable." I felt a wave of relief that Tyler's instincts had protected the company from even worse damage than what actually occurred. But here's the thing. When I told her I couldn't get the files she wanted, she got really angry. Not disappointed or frustrated, but genuinely angry, like I had ruined some important plan. "Did she explain why those specific files were so important?" "She said you weren't giving her enough information to do her job effectively, but that didn't make sense because she had never complained about lacking access before, and the files she wanted weren't related to any project I knew about." Tyler paused and took a deep breath before continuing. "Oh, Preston, I think Brenna has been planning to leave your company for a lot longer than we realized. Maybe even since she started working there." "What makes you say that?" "Because I found something when I was helping her move stuff out of her apartment yesterday." He pulled a folder from his backpack and set it on my desk. "She asked me to throw away some old paperwork, but I recognized your company letterhead and thought I should check what it was before tossing it." I opened the folder and found copies of employment contracts, salary information, client lists, and financial projections, all photocopied and organized in a way that suggested systematic information gathering rather than casual record keeping. "Tyler, this information could have seriously damaged our business if it had fallen into the wrong hands." "I know. And Preston, some of these documents are dated from her first month working for you. She's been copying sensitive information since the beginning." The revelation was like a punch to the stomach. I had hired Brenna because I wanted to help her rebuild after a devastating divorce, and she had been planning to betray me from day one. "There's more," Tyler said quietly. "I found emails printed out from last year where she was already complaining to Marcus about working for you. She wrote things like, 'I can't believe I have to take orders from my little brother, and Preston acts like he's some kind of business genius, but I could do this job better than him.' Tyler, why are you showing me this now?" "Because I want you to stop feeling guilty about firing her. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made in anger or jealousy. This was a long-term plan to destroy your business, and you stopped it before it could succeed." Looking at the evidence Tyler had uncovered, I realized that my decision Friday night hadn't been revenge or family drama. It had been legitimate business protection based on real threats that I hadn't fully understood at the time. "Preston, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Of course." "Are you okay? I mean, really okay? Because I keep waiting for you to fall apart or get angry or something, but you seem almost relieved about everything that's happened." I thought about his question carefully. Was I okay? 3 days ago, my sister had publicly humiliated me, stolen from my company, and tried to destroy my reputation. My extended family had participated in coordinated attack on my character. The person I had trusted most in my business had been systematically gathering information to compete against me. But sitting in my office, surrounded by employees who respected my leadership and clients who trusted my integrity, I realized I felt better than I had in months. Tyler, I think I'm more okay now than I've been since Mom and Dad died. How is that possible? Because for 4 years, I've been carrying the weight of trying to make everyone happy and keep everyone together, even when that meant ignoring red flags about people's true intentions. Friday night, I finally chose to protect what I had built honestly instead of what I had inherited accidentally. You mean the family? I mean the obligation I felt to fix everyone's problems and make everyone's life perfect. That's not love, Tyler. That's control disguised as generosity. Around noon, Aunt Patricia called with an update that surprised me. Preston, honey, I wanted you to know that Robert and I had a long conversation with Brenna yesterday. We told her that what she did was unacceptable and that she needs to take full responsibility for the consequences. How did she respond? Not well initially. She spent an hour trying to convince us that you were the real problem and that she was just defending herself. But when we refused to agree with her, she finally started to understand how serious this situation really is. Is she okay financially? I know she was worried about rent and bills. She'll be fine. She found a job this morning at a marketing firm downtown. The pay is less than what you were giving her, but it's honest work, and they don't know about her recent troubles. I felt genuinely relieved that Brenna had found employment. Despite everything that had happened, I didn't want to see her homeless or struggling with basic survival. Preston, I need to tell you something else. Brenna asked us to give you a message. What kind of message? She wanted us to tell you that she's going to publicly retract the false statements she made about your business. She's planning to post an apology on social media explaining that her comments were made in anger and don't reflect the actual working conditions at your company. The offer of public vindication felt less important than it would have a few days earlier. But I appreciated the gesture as a sign that Brenna was beginning to understand the real-world consequences of her actions. Aunt Patricia, tell her I appreciate that, but what matters more to me is that she learns from this experience and builds something positive in her new job. 2 weeks later, I was reviewing fourth quarter projections when Tyler knocked on my office door. Preston, someone's here to see you? Brenna walked in behind him looking more put together than she had in months. She was wearing professional clothes that I didn't recognize, and her demeanor was calmer than I had seen it in years. Hi, Preston. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Of course, how are you doing? I'm doing well, actually. The new job is challenging in good ways, and my boss treats me with respect while still holding me accountable for results. We talked for about 20 minutes, and I was struck by how different she seemed. The resentment and entitlement that had characterized our recent interactions were gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine humility. Preston, I need to tell you something important. Working for someone else has made me realize how much you actually taught me about business and how generous you were with opportunities and responsibilities. I'm glad the new position is working out well. But more than that, I understand now why you had to fire me. I wasn't just betraying you. I was betraying everyone who worked for the company and every client who trusted us. My actions could have destroyed something that a lot of people depend on. It was the first time she had acknowledged the broader impact of her choices, rather than just focusing on how the situation affected her personally. Brenna, I want you to know that I've never stopped loving you or wanting you to succeed. I just couldn't let family loyalty compromise my responsibilities to other people. I know, and I respect you for that now, even though I hated you for it at first. She paused and seemed to gather courage for whatever she wanted to say next. Preston, I've been thinking a lot about what Marcus said to convince me that you were holding me back. The truth is, he didn't have to work very hard because I already believed it on some level. I was jealous of your success and resentful about working for my younger brother, and he just exploited feelings I already had. Why were you jealous? You're incredibly talented and capable. Because when mom and dad died, you stepped up and took charge of everything while I fell apart. You kept the family together, built a business, took care of Tyler, and made everything look easy. I felt like the failure who needed to be rescued, and I hated feeling that way. Her honesty was painful but necessary for both of us. Brenna, you weren't a failure. You were grieving and trying to rebuild your life after a devastating divorce. Different people handle trauma differently, and that doesn't make one approach better than another. Maybe, but I think I needed to prove to myself that I could succeed independently before I could appreciate what you had done for our family. As she prepared to leave, Brenna turned back with one final comment. Preston, I want you to know that posting that video and trying to damage your business was the worst thing I've ever done to another person. I'm going to have to live with that for the rest of my life. Brenna, we all make mistakes. What matters is what we learn from them and how we treat people going forward. After she left, Tyler and I stood in my office looking out at the bustling workspace beyond. Do you think she's really changed? Tyler asked. I think she's beginning to understand some things about herself and about relationships that she didn't understand before. Whether that leads to lasting change depends on choices she makes going forward. Are you going to trust her again? I'm going to love her again, which is different from trusting her. Trust has to be rebuilt through consistent behavior over time, but love can be unconditional, even when trust isn't. That evening, I drove home through downtown Denver thinking about the lessons of the past month. Building something valuable requires more than just hard work and good intentions. It requires the courage to protect what you've built from people who would damage it, even when those people are family members you love. It requires understanding the difference between loyalty and enabling, between helping and controlling, between family love and business partnerships. Most importantly, it requires recognizing that your worth isn't determined by other people's approval, but by the integrity with which you conduct yourself and the positive impact you have on people who depend on you. 6 months later, my company had grown to 32 employees, expanded into 2 new markets, and been recognized as one of the fastest-growing businesses in Colorado. Tyler had declared a business major and was planning to intern with us during the summer. Brenna had been promoted at her new company and sent me a professional congratulations card that felt genuine and appropriate. And I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to let them destroy what you've built together. The success wasn't luck. It was the result of 8 years of consistent effort, ethical business practices, and the courage to make difficult decisions when they were necessary. Sometimes the people who call you lucky are really just telling you that they don't understand the price you've paid for what you've achieved. And that's okay, because your worth isn't determined by their understanding. So, call to action. Thank you for following Preston's journey through one of the most challenging periods of his life. His story raises important questions about family loyalty, business ethics, and the courage required to protect what you've built honestly. Have you ever faced a situation where you had to choose between family harmony and doing what you knew was right? How do you balance loyalty to people you love with responsibility to others who depend on you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If Preston's story resonated with you, please consider liking this video to help others find it who might be facing similar challenges. And if you'd like to hear more stories about people who found the courage to stand up for their principles, even when it was difficult, please subscribe and share this video with someone who might benefit from Preston's example. Remember, your worth isn't determined by other people's understanding of your journey, but by the integrity with which you live your values every single day. Thank you for watching, and I hope Preston's story leaves you feeling inspired to protect what matters most in your own life.